You're listening to Interactive Wrestling Radio, featuring the Interactive Interview, courtesy of WrestlingEpicenter.com.
So what you gonna do?
Let me talk to you, dummies.
Oh, yeah.
You're where it's at.
If you're smart like me, you gotta listen.
And if you don't listen to it,
I'll come out of your computer and body slam your ass.
don't be a Melvin.
I will scar you.
Open your third eye.
Woo! It's gonna be cool. Oh, what a rush.
It's showtime!
We had a lovely conversation.
To the interactive interview. Interactive Wrestling Radio.
The Epicenter.
This week on Championship Wrestling from Arizona. Tune in to see our historic United Wrestling Network event from China. United Tag Titles and NWA title on the line. Check your local listings for time and channel.
Welcome back to Interactive Wrestling Radio. It is our pleasure to have on the line a man who's going to be calling it a career within the week, as a matter of fact. I said to him when he announced it that I'd like to have him on before he retires, and he stayed true to his word. It is fantastic. Bobby Fulton. Mr. Fulton, are you with me?
Yes, I am, man. Excited about the opportunity to talk to all your listeners. And, I'm just excited to spend some time with you here and everything.
All right. We're looking forward to having you on, too. So I guess the first question I got to ask you is, why now? What made you decide that this was time to do your retirement tour and to finally call it a career?
I had actually originally was going to retire last year, I think in November. I held on just a little bit longer than what I wanted to do. And the reason why it's a good time to jump off is I still got pretty good health. I want to keep it that way. I'm 57 years old. There's not too many. I mean, there's quite a few wrestlers, I guess, that's still doing it, or a few anyway. But when I get in that ring, I want to give my all. And the thing of it is, 40 years is good. It was a dream of mine as a kid. I spoke to an elementary school today here in Ross County and Southeastern Elementary School. And I told those kids if they have a dream and a determination and a passion, then they can accomplish their dreams. And I mean that, and I want to tell every child that, because, listen, I had a chance to live a dream, and not only that, but to go farther, sir, than I ever would have imagined going when I started my career at the age of 16 years of age.
That's incredible. And your son started early, too?
Yeah,
I mean, he's
16.
talking about
Yeah.
So incredibly mature for yourself and for your son to have started so young. So it's incredible.
Thanks.
Just how much you guys matured so young.
Thanks. And my son was his mom when we did the test when she was pregnant with him, and they did the little scan and found out it was going to be a boy. She said, "Promise me one thing, that he'll never be in the wrestling business." And the first thing he could do was crawl on the floor. Before he could really talk, he would crawl and he would slap his hands 3 times on the floor and go ding, ding, ding. So he was hooked from that age on. And I mean, he's watched a lot of my matches, and I'll never forget me being in matches with George South and guys like that. And he would run and get the police, go help my daddy. He's getting beat up now. And now he's 19 years old. He's graduated high school and college. He's got an associate's degree. I'm very proud of my son, Dylan. He is not only helping me, but he's helped so many others, professionals, older guys, I say, especially with the social media and everything. And I'm really proud of my son. I'm proud of his accomplishments already in professional wrestling. And, hey, the sky's the limit. I am stepping out of the ring, of course, but I'm still going to be doing a few things with wrestling, especially promoting the shows and stuff. But I just tell you the truth, sir, it hurts longer. It's harder to get up. And my mind says you can go, but my body says no. And when it's that time, it's time to say, you know what, I've lived a dream. I've got a chance to go to Japan 17 times, wrestle for all the major territories during the territory days, or most of them anyway. And it's a good getting off place while I still have my mobility and that's one thing I want to do. I've got some rehabbing I want to do with some shoulder work. The strange thing of it was, in August, I couldn't turn my head for about 20 years. And Shane Douglas suplexed me on a table at an event, wrestling show.
Yeah.
And the table didn't break, but I could hear the sounds of Rice Krispies as milk's being poured over them all throughout my body. And then I was really scared. I thought, boy, I've really done it this time. Or Shane Douglas has really fixed me this time. Well, the next day I could move my neck. So my neck moves really good now, I guess, where I've been out so long that when I hit that table, it just threw my body into a shock and it adjusted it and everything. So I've got some shoulder problems, my knees, everything else is good. I've got relatively good help, except I have some eye issues in which some of the folks may know about that I've had for a couple of years. And I'm blind in my right eye, but that hasn't stopped me from wrestling. And a lot of people, Jerry Jarrett contacted me when it was going on. He said, you got to remember, you only got one more eye left. But hey, God's blessed me to be able to see real good with my other eye and everything. But I'm just, like I said, I don't mean to overtalk you, but I get excited when I start talking about professional wrestling. When I start talking about all the great fans that I've met throughout my 40 years in professional wrestling and the great wrestling stars, it's been a wild adventure, to say the least.
Absolutely. And probably your most famous run. There's been, you've had a heck of a career, but I think that it's no secret that probably your biggest run was with Tommy Rogers when you guys were the Fantastics.
Yes.
How did you end up teaming with Tommy, and your thoughts on Tommy? I know he's dearly departed now, but thoughts on Tommy and how you guys ended up teaming together.
Well, Tommy and I had originally met in Memphis, Tennessee for Jerry Jarrett's company. He was a single wrestler. I was a single wrestler. And we were both junior heavyweights. And what happened was the Rock and Roll Express was in Louisiana, and they were due back in Tennessee for 90 days, and they were looking for a tag team to fill in for 90 days at the old Mid-South territory, Bill Watts' territory. Superstar Bill Dundee chose me, and Cowboy Bill Watts brought Tommy. They put us together as a 90-day replacement team, and the rest is history. I mean, we gelled so good together as a team, and I'm not just saying it. But you can tell by the matches, regardless of who we wrestled, whether it was the Midnight Express, the Fame, or the Sheep Herders, or Eddie Gilbert and Sting, or Eddie Gilbert and Jerry Gray, or Jerry Gray and Pat Rose, or John Tatum and Jack Victory, or the Royal Family. Just so many different tag teams, or Tully and Arn. I mean, and we wrestled in that very first Crockett Cup, and I had people say that us and the Sheep Herders stole the show of the Crockett Cup, and that was no small feat, because that was all the major teams from the country at that time that was in that very first Crockett Cup there at the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. But Tommy and I, we gelled really well, and people asked why. We complimented each other's style, and we realized that there was no I in team. Everything we did, we were tag team oriented, and that's the way we did it. And as you said, Tommy Rogers passed away. There wasn't no suicide or anything like that. That had been brought up before, especially when he first passed. But actually, he choked and while he was sleeping, and that's what happened. He passed away in his sleep, and he choked on some food that he had eaten and everything. But the thing of it was that Tommy was a great athlete, one of the best drop kicks in the business, and he was very explosive. He always trained hard, was always in immaculate shape, and he was. I consider him a dear friend, and not only that, but he was a brother in Christ to me. We both had accepted Christ as our Lord and Savior, and we spoke about God's Word and about the Bible almost on a daily basis and everything. So he was a tremendous friend, and he helped me to realize the dreams that I had as a young boy to be a part of some of wrestling's greatest matches.
Absolutely. We just recently had on, actually courtesy of your son, we had on Kevin Sullivan, who
Right.
sang your praises. He said what an incredible talent you guys both were. I guess kind of just return the favor. What would your thoughts on the Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan?
Kevin Sullivan, he was always a guy. I followed his career from the days of New York in the 70s. A lot of people might not realize it, but he was in the WWWF. The guy is a genius in professional wrestling. He's a no-nonsense guy. I mean, I'm not saying it just to return a favor, but I'm saying it because it's the way I feel. He was a no-nonsense guy. He wrestled in the major territories, drew money. You see, that's the other thing about professional wrestling. It's one thing to wrestle on top, but are you drawing the people in to make them want to come see you? And whether he was Kevin Sullivan, the Boston Battler during the Georgia Championship Wrestling days when he was a big baby face, or up in New York, or from the days when he was the Taskmaster, or the other things that he had became in professional wrestling, whether it was wrestling Dusty Rhodes or any of his opponents. He drew big money everywhere. I have nothing but admiration for Kevin Sullivan. I mean that. The guy always stayed in the gym. He always trained hard. He had great big tree trunk legs. Actually, to me, Kevin Sullivan was built like the ideal wrestler. He was short and stocky and thick, which is the way someone low to the ground for a professional wrestler. And he's a genius in it. I mean, what a tremendous mind and everything. Absolutely. I mean, I have nothing, like I said, but admiration for Kevin Sullivan. He is just, anybody. The one thing about it is, not everybody can be a professional wrestler, but not everybody can contribute to the professional wrestling business, especially as much as Kevin Sullivan has. And for that, I give him props and just, and he's still doing it today. So that's the other thing.
Much like yourself, I told him, and I'll tell you, fitting your entire career into a 20, 30-minute spot is very tough to do, but we're going to try and do it. We talked a little bit about your matches with the Midnight Express, and of course, those are probably some of the most famous ones that you had. I'm going to ask you about some ones you might not get asked about as much.
Yep.
I am a big fan of Mike Davis, the late Mike Davis,
Rock and Roll
RPMs.
Yep.
Yes, sir. And Mike was a different kind of character. From what I've heard from people who worked with him, they said he was a little bit offbeat. Thoughts on Mike Davis?
Well, Mike Davis, I like Mike all right. Tommy Lane wrestled as Tommy Rogers in Kansas City and teamed with Marty Jannetty, and they were called the Uptown Boys. For those who don't realize, a lot of times people thought, well, was that Tommy Rogers your partner? No, that was Tommy Lane, who was Mike Davis's partner. But the funny thing of it was that before, I don't think Mike Davis cared much for Bobby Fulton, because he said some things about me before his passing and everything. And he said, well, I'm glad, on the internet and stuff, which is cool. But I don't consider myself ever an egomaniac in professional wrestling. I was all for the betterment of the matches and for whatever was best for businesses, as Triple H has coined the phrase now. You know what I'm saying? But Mike, I knew of Mike before that when he was conjured up by Kevin Sullivan and was the American Dream in Florida. Do you remember those days?
Yes, sir.
And this and that. Mike is the phrase a horse of a different color? He was different to me as well. You see, but back then we didn't get a chance to associate with the heels. So they were in separate dressing rooms and everything, but we had some real good matches with the Rock and Roll RPMs and everything like that. I remember one time Mike got so mad because Tommy Rogers drop kicked him in the mouth and knocked one of his teeth out, and he was real mad about that. So, but things happen, in wrestling. It's professional wrestling. Yep. It's not SpongeBob, whatever. It's things happen. You get your tooth knocked out, you get your nose broke, you get your fingers broke, you get your shoulders busted up, your knees, and this and that and everything. But Mike was Mike was all right. He was a good professional wrestler, and like I said, outside the ring, I never knew him. So many guys I never knew outside the ring, let alone outside the arena afterwards, you know.
Absolutely. So you had an opportunity to do something that a lot of the other guys don't do, and you actually went from being a wrestler to being a promoter and then also doing both. When you made that transition into being somebody who was the promoter as well as one of the talent, did your perspective on everything kind of shift a little bit? Did you see it a little differently than you did when you were wrestling?
Let me tell you what's funny. I started wrestling at the age of 16. I had my first match in June of 77. And that was in Clarksburg, West Virginia. I promoted my very first wrestling match in September of 77. So people say, how'd you become a wrestler? I said, well, I become a wrestler. And I said, I'll never forget promoting my first event was in Hallsville, Ohio, a little community outside of Chillicothe at the Indian Summer Festival. I still have a ticket from it, and I remember it. And that was my very first event that I promoted. And I promoted a couple more after that with the help of my father, James Hines, which I'm no junior, but my dad, Jim Hines, Big Jim Hines, everybody always called him. But he helped me promote, and as a matter of fact, we promoted for many, many years. My perspective of the wrestlers, did it change?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the deal, brother. In the 90s, I was promoting wrestling shows, and I had my guys that I knew, my friends called me up and say, well, Bobby, how's the house looking? Is ticket selling? I said, they're selling pretty good, man. They'd say, okay, I need more money. Well, finally, I got so aggravated with it, I was driving down the road one day, and I heard about tough man competitions. And I said, well, I just give the prize money. I got 2 gates, 2 concession nights selling, possibly 1.5 nights of rent. And I went into that business in 93. And I stayed into that business until, or 92 or 93, and stayed in that business till 2010, promoting tough man competition, which I called it the toughest and baddest brawl throughout North and South Carolina. Ended up getting my brother, who was later on after Tommy Rogers, a fantastic for a time. My brother Jackie, George Hines, Jackie Fulton. But I got him into that business also, and we promoted MMA cage fights. And I promoted car shows, gospel events. A guy by the name of Dale Mann, who was an outlaw promoter in Kentucky. He taught me about promoting. And the principles that he taught me, I use to this very day, except, of course, they've changed somewhat. And in some fashions, there was no internet media then, you know, and this and that. But the things that Dale Mann taught me at a young age, I still apply it to this day, and I give thanks to the late, great Dale Mann, who was a no-nonsense guy as well, for teaching me. And also, this Saturday, May the 26th, I'm going to get a chance to have Flying Fred Curry, who was an inspiration of mine and a big help to me young in my career, that's going to be there. Also, Superstar Bill Dundee, who was a tremendous influence in my career as well. Both those guys I hold in very high esteem and helping me to achieve my dream right there with Tommy Rogers. I mean, if it wasn't for meeting these fellows and them helping me, I would have probably never, you know, when I was first started, I figured I'll just work a regular job and perhaps I'll wrestle somewhere on the weekends. Now they're called independent guys, but when I started, there was no independent. Either you were affiliated with the National Wrestling Alliance, who ruled most of the land except for that little portion up in the Northeast, and also right there in Middle America, Vern Gagne's AWA, but the rest was NWA. And the other guys, if you weren't part of the NWA, then you were considered outlaw. And that's how I kind of got started in the wrestling business. I started at about 11 years old, setting up the ring for promotion. Hank Best, promoter who had wrestled for Al Half, as a matter of fact, who had promoted Dr. Sam Shepard's first match. And I don't know if you know of Dr. Sam Shepard, but he's the inspiration for the movie The Fugitive and the TV series. He was a doctor out of Cleveland that was accused of killing his wife, that later became a professional wrestler. And on the internet, if you Google Dr. Sam Shepard, you'll see a Time Life magazine. He's on the cover holding a poster for a show in Waverly, Ohio, his very first match As a matter of fact, recently passed away was a guy that let Dr. Sam borrow his boots because he had broke his ankle earlier, and Sam needed some boots to wear that night. And the two guys that wrestled, Dr. Sam Shepard, still live in my hometown, are part of the Ohio Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, and will no doubt be there May the 26th as well. They're still alive and kicking. So I've been blessed, brother, and I don't mean to go on and talk, but I get excited. I'm going to stop here and listen to you a minute.
All right, so I'm going to try and just give you a couple more questions and let you go. But no, I love what you're saying, so don't feel you need to stop on my account. You mentioned the territories quite a bit, and
Yeah.
I have everybody on the show from guys that are currently holding Impact Wrestling Gold and working
Right.
for WWE and the territorial, the developmental territories, all the
Right.
way to legends like yourself and Kevin Sullivan. So I kind of get a different perspective from everybody. I was curious your perspective on the way wrestling is right now, where there's more choices because of the internet, where a lot of things are available on the internet to be seen. So a lot of people are saying, well, it's kind of, sort of, in a way, like the territory days of days gone by.
Well, actually, it's not kind of, sort of, in the ways of the territory days, because as I see it, there's a big undercurrent of backyard wrestling that's hurting professional wrestling. The independent, I don't want to ever be considered, and anyone that uses the term independent, to me, I wouldn't use it, because to me it's a step down. Once you classify yourself as an independent, that's already a step down. We're all supposed to be professional wrestlers and this and that. I was telling someone today, as a matter of fact, spoke with Jerry Gray, and we were doing a program. And I told him, I said, we talked about the 4 and 5 hours in the car with guys that were older than us. That was our classrooms. That's missing in professional wrestling. And what you have is you have guys that might take 4 or 5 lessons from somebody. And then they'll open up a wrestling school and a wrestling company, and they really don't know what they're doing. And then they're teaching guys. So it's a long stretch of not good quality. And then when you go to a town and you advertise wrestling, they said, well, we just seen wrestling in town, and boy, it was horrible. Is this going to be the same junk? And they false advertise people and stuff like that. So as far as the territories, it's not. There's the WWE, there's Ring of Honor, there's Impact Wrestling. There's a small string of good promoters out there, but there is a massive amount of people that shouldn't be in the wrestling business. Listen, I love professional baseball. I grew up on the Big Red Machine watching Pete Rose and Johnny Bench, and I played Little League ball.
Yes, sir.
But that doesn't mean that I could make it to be an MLB ball player. Do you understand what I'm saying? What we've done,
Absolutely.
what's happened to wrestling is, if you have $20, you can come get a lesson and consider yourself a professional wrestler. And there's something wrong with that picture. And I think that wrestling schools, which they didn't have years ago, I broke into business. It was on-the-job training. But the thing of it is, I think that they've hurt. And what happened was, I'll never forget when they started, because a lot of guys started them out of necessity. And the reason why is the territories were shutting down. They had this certain set of skills. They had to try to make money for their families. So they opened up wrestling schools. And when they opened up wrestling schools, at first they did it for the right reasons. But now it's a watered down version. Listen, if a guy has never been outside of 40 miles of his hometown wrestling, and he's only wrestled 7 times a year for 20 years, 7 times 20 is 140. He can tell you, I've wrestled for 20 years, but he's had 140 matches. Now, back in the day, we wrestled 9 times a week in 9 different cities. It don't take long to rack up 140 matches with a schedule like that. And I think that it's hurt our business in a lot of ways, not left it in good hands, because we've let guys that don't deserve it. And people talk about paying their dues. They don't understand it because they don't respect the wrestling business. And when you've been, it's hard to say when you've paid your dues, you know, and this and that. It's just a lot of guys, older guys, and it ain't about bitterness. It's about betterment. I've never been bitter about nothing in professional wrestling. I told you I figured I would only wrestle on the weekends. I never would have imagined I could have, God blessed me to make a living at it. But I was passionate about it, and I was willing to do whatever it took to succeed. I left Chillicothe, Ohio. My dad said, son, the only thing I'm asking you is I want you to graduate from high school. And I graduated from high school, and the night of my graduation ceremony, you can look, I believe, on YouTube and watch me wrestling on the WWWF television doing jobs for guys. I graduated, but I didn't do the walk across the stage. I got my diploma and everything. It's in North Carolina in China Grove. And I did what my dad said, and as soon as that happened, I left home with $30 in my pocket, an alarm clock, in case I had to sleep in my car. I had to wake up. We didn't have cell phones back then. And a dream, a hope, and a prayer. And like I said, the rest has been history. It's been a wonderful ride. All the wrestling part of it's going to come to an end. May the 26th, my son's asked me, said, Dad, will you cry? I said, I don't know what I'll do, but one thing I will do, I will live in the moment of how God has blessed a guy 5'9" to be in the land of giants, wrestling some of wrestling's biggest stars. I mean, you know, when the Ultimate Warrior thanks you in his Hall of Fame speech, he thanked Tommy Rogers and I. He thanked us for helping him. Sting came right to my hometown and did an appearance here, and he said, I'm thankful to Bobby Fulton for helping me. Razor Ramon, I seen him in Philadelphia, and he came up to me. He said, Bobby Fulton, I want to thank you and guys like you guys that paved the road for all of us that we could make millions of dollars. There's guys that are thankful. Stone Cold Steve Austin, I seen him in New Orleans, and he said, man, I loved watching you guys wrestle when I was younger. And I mean, I've had so many guys tell me that it was because of us and the type of matches that we had with whoever, that their aspirations and dreams to become a professional wrestler, it wasn't that they said, man, we can do it because those jive turkeys can do it. It was because, man, we can do it because, man, I aspire to work hard because those guys worked hard. And one thing about Tommy Rogers and I can honestly tell you, and Jim Barnett, the late great promoter, I don't know if you've ever heard that name or not.
My boy.
Yep. Jim Barnett, he is Mr. Wrestling. If it wasn't for him, he was the original World Championship Wrestling in Australia. He had the wrestling country. He was there with the Dumont Network, and he was there when Vince started to take over the country. He was there with Georgia Championship Wrestling. I mean, he was everywhere. But he walked up to Tommy Rogers and I, and he said, my boys, you'll never have a bad match as long as you work as hard as you do. And that was what Tommy Rogers and I did, whether it was 50, 500, 5,000, 25, 35, whatever thousand or hundreds. We got in there. We worked our tails off for those fans because we're fans and stayed fans ourselves, and we gave it all that we could give nightly. And with that, we were blessed. And to look back on my career and to say, man, I am thankful, God Almighty, for all that you blessed me with.
Absolutely. I got two more left for you, two more questions for you. In 1997, a gentleman who is going to be appearing in Circleville with you at your event, Jim Cornette, brought you guys into the WWF for a light heavyweight championship, a light heavyweight match. It wasn't for the championship, just one match. Did you guys have any kind of thoughts that, oh, you know what, this is finally our chance to get to the WWE, or was it just like a one-off?
Here's the deal. Jim Cornette was trying to talk Vince McMahon into bringing smaller guys in and doing that tournament. And he called me up and he said, Bobby, I'm wanting Vince to get a chance to look at a couple smaller guys. He said, would you come up? I said, yeah. He said, do you think Tommy Rogers? I said, I'll tell you what, let me and Tommy Rogers wrestle each other. Because here's the deal. I had a business and I was making so much money that I didn't want to stop my business. I didn't have any aspirations to go to New York. I was never a WWWF type of guy, WWF, WWE guy. I loved the more Southern style of wrestling. And although they changed it as the years, I don't like, I'm going to tell you this. I'm not crazy about driving in big cities, especially up in the Northeast and the traffic and stuff like that. I feel like I got to be a NASCAR driver. I had an opportunity. I'll tell you what, in about 1983, Eddie Gilbert had been in New York. Do you know Eddie Gilbert was in New York and was involved in an automobile accident and about got killed? And he was Sergeant Slaughter's, Sergeant Slaughter or Bob's Backlund's trainee. Do you remember that or ever heard of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, when Vince started taking over, the Moondogs, what they used to do, they'd do TVs long before they would come into the territory. And the Moondogs seen me in Memphis, said, Bobby, would you go to St. Louis? And it was Rex, and it was Randy Colley and Larry Booker. And they said, would you please come to St. Louis and put us over on television? This is when I was just working underneath. I said, sure, I would love to do that. So I drove over there and did that, and you hear that beeping. That's my son blowing my phone up, probably making sure I'm doing this interview with you. He keeps me on my toes. But real quickly, I'll try to answer this. I went there and I did the TV. Then Randy Colley, I started in San Antonio there for Joe Blanchard. Randy Colley come and said, Bobby, they're wanting you to start in New York as a single wrestler. And I was a smaller guy, but they liked Eddie Gilbert. And of course, he was gone and this and that. And I felt like they may have put me in his position or whatever. But I said no. And I mean, not that it would have went anywhere or whatever. I wasn't interested in going then. And so in 1997, I had my business, and I definitely wasn't interested in going. As a matter of fact, I had another opportunity to work for them. They offered me to train guys when they were in Louisville and what they wanted me to do was go scout guys. So I've had a couple of different opportunities to work for them, but I just never did. Listen, I know people look at that as the big time. But to me, I had already been to the big time. I'd wrestled on world-class wrestling, one of the hottest in Memphis wrestling, the hottest. I mean, WWE can't even get those kind of ratings that we got back then. And here, I want to tell you this, brother. We're talking about a career looking back at things that happened 30 years ago. 30 years from now, what will they be talking about?
That's exactly
They're not even talking about what's going on wrestling now. Very little and far and few in between. They talk about John Cena and his Make-A-Wish. They never talk about his wrestling. They talk about what great things, and they justify it, but what he did with Make-A-Wish, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I think that's great that John Cena has seen more people and did more things with the Make-A-Wish. I think that's great. But also at the same time, what have you done for the wrestling business? I'm not disrespecting Mr. Cena or Roman Reigns when I said recently, if he can't get over as a babyface and the people are booing him, fire him or turn him heel. Get rid of him. He's not getting the job done. It's plain and simple. If I can't get over as a babyface and they hire me as a babyface and I can't get over, then they got to make a change somewhere. And people's just not buying Roman Reigns. Not to get off on that tangent, but just to go there real quick. But if people are talking about, and I see people on the street all the time, and they'll say, you know what, as a matter of fact, 2 nights ago I was in West Virginia, and a guy told me, he said at 6:05 on Saturday, the streets in this town of West Virginia was empty. Why? Because wrestling was on TBS. And everybody watched it. Georgia Championship Wrestling, World Championship Wrestling. It was the flagship station for professional wrestling all over this nation, the Superstation. And people knew everything going on and could tell you stuff, and they still talk about the stuff that went on with Buzz Sawyer and Wildfire Tommy Rich and then us and the Midnight Express and Tully and Iron and Ric Flair and Magnum TA and you name it. They remember from that Superstation that's instilled in them because they sat and watched it and they were absorbed into it. But it's not that way now. It's not that way now.
No, absolutely not. You're talking to a guy who grew up in New Jersey. I was kind of force-fed WWF, WWF, and I'm 36. I'm 36 years old, so I always remember, though, being a kid and getting world-class championship wrestling on some of my other channels.
Wow.
And getting, and watching all this stuff. So I might be 36, but I'm an old 36 because I remember all this stuff, and what I haven't, I watched back on tape. So I remember all of this.
I hear you.
All right.
Yep.
Final question for you, and you kind of touched on it already. Your son kind of asked you, but here we are. You started this retirement tour back in 2015. Here we are now. We're in the last couple of days of it.
Yes.
Any apprehension about it, or do you know it is definitely time?
No, it's there. It's there. It's there, and it's going to happen. I have for an opponent Nick Kid Curry, and I'm reaching back to the days when I wrestled Wild Bull Curry and Flying Fred Curry at 16 and 17. This man is a champion, a Naga, grappling style champion in college, and he's got a lot of great credentials. And he's wanting to follow in the Curry tradition of his older brother Rocket, of his father Flying Fred Curry, and of course of his grandfather Wild Bull Curry. And I could think of no better way than to lend a helping hand to that. But with that being said, I'm going out there serious business because it is in front of my hometown crowd. I'm going to have my friends, my family, fans, people's traveling from all over the country to be there. So if Nick Curry at 21 years old in great condition, if he thinks I'm going to be a pushover, he's sadly mistaken, because listen to me. I'm like that old Toby Keith song. I'm not as good as I once was, but on May the 26th, brother, I'm going to be as good as I ever was. And I'm not going to be a pushover. I'm in it to win it. I want to walk out of there with my hand raised high. It is going to be Bobby Fulton's last match, and that's it. And it's written in stone. And that's the way it is. But I've been blessed in so many ways. Like I said, I've got some shoulder problems. I want to rehab. I want to get in the gym. I can't do it with wrestling, and they're just too mangled up, actually. And I'm not going to get surgery. I don't like getting cut on. So May 26th, Circleville, Ohio, Fairgrounds Coliseum. It's a nostalgic night, and the reason why, not only is it my retirement night, we've got all kinds of superstars that's going to be there from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and now. But listen, that old building there, Dylan shared some stuff earlier, from the 1950s. That building was built in the 40s, but wrestling has been there since the late 40s. And as a matter of fact, they're going to raise the building, meaning they're going to tear it down, not just after this or whatever, but they're just tearing the building down for whatever reason. They're going to build a new arena, but this building's going to be raised, so it's a historic night. It's a magical night. It has that old school atmosphere in it where the fans either boo or cheer. They boo the guys they hate. They cheer the guys they love. They get involved. They get excited. Some of the greatest fans on earth will be there May the 26th to witness World Classic Championship, World Classic Professional Wrestling at its very best. They're going to see Wildfire Tommy Rich, Superstar Bill Dundee, Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, Tracy Smothers. They're going to see all kinds of great wrestling stars. Abyss is going to be there in action against the Barbarian. Go be myself.
Wow.
And we just got
two big dudes on that one.
Huh?
Two big dudes in that one.
Two big dudes. They're going to lock horns, brother. And when the smoke clears, I just wonder who's going to win. But I'm going to tell you something right now. It's going to be a tremendous night. We've got tag team matches. We've got a 6-man tag, and where Bill Dundee's the captain, and he'll be in action. Kevin Sullivan's on the other side. He is the team captain, and he'll be in action. It's going to be wild and crazy. It's going to be wilder than any Saturday night in Bug Tussle. And if you've ever been to Bug Tussle, brother, it gets wild and crazy there. They don't roll up the streets at 6 p.m. That's when things just get started. And I'm telling you right now, anyone with an earshot of my voice, it's worth, I told Jim Cornette, he said it's worth driving 250 miles, 300 miles. But Dylan's told me we've got people flying from California, from Oregon, from Arizona, from Tennessee. People are driving in from the surrounding states. People are coming in from everywhere for this fan fest. It's going to take place from 9 until 3. Then the big wrestling card is going to take place at 8 p.m. But in the middle, we're going to have a special wrestling seminar by Flying Fred Curry from 3:30 to 5:30, in which you, if you're a professional wrestler and want to hone your skills, you can come be a part of that. It's not for the fans. Then Jim Cornette's going to do an experience live with a lot of special guests, and of course, Jimmy's going to be there, and he's going to watch my last match. And I hope he don't bring a tennis racket with him. You know, he wore me out with that thing years ago. But it's going to be a great night for sure. Appreciate you having me. And I am just excited to get a chance every time I can talk about the world's #1 sport, professional wrestling.
Absolutely. On a fan note on my end, I want to thank you for the many, many years of memories that you guys, yourself and Tommy, and even yourself and your brother also
Thanks.
gave us in Smokey Mountain and so forth. I want to thank you for all the memories and all the great matches you guys had. Thank you for your career, and I sure do appreciate it, and I wish you the best of luck in your retirement.
Thank you, sir. God bless you, and God bless each and every one out there. And like I said, I'm just thankful for this opportunity. You gave me a chance to talk to not only you, but all the great fans listening. God bless, and so long. Until May the 26th, I'm going to tell you one thing right now. I'm like an old Timex watch, if you remember. They can take a licking and keep right on ticking. On May the 26th, it's going to be wild, loud, and unpredictable. I can't wait to get to that day in Circleville, Ohio, Fairgrounds Coliseum. Woo!
This is the Wrestling Epicenter. For over 15 years, we've brought you the top names in professional wrestling for exclusive interviews. Everybody you see here has been interviewed by our site. But we're more than just interviews. So be sure and check out WrestlingEpicenter.com for news, results, information, and of course our store. WrestlingEpicenter.com, your #1 source for wrestling information.